Hi everybody, I'm Robin Jackson. Welcome to our Motivating Reluctant Students While Keeping Yourself Motivated in the Process webinar. We've had some technical difficulties, and so we apologize for that. We're using some new technology, and so it just kind of went haywire on us, and we couldn't see or hear. Some people were saying they couldn't see or hear me before, but I think we got it straight now, so we're going to try it from the very beginning, and we're also going to make sure that we send everybody the replay of the webinar so that you can see the parts that you may have missed. So welcome to How to Motivate Your Reluctant Students While Keeping Yourself Motivated in the Process. I'm Robin Jackson, and I'm really glad you're here. And if you were able to stick with us while we had our technical difficulties, then thank you for sticking with us. Now, I'm going to turn things over so that you can see some slides, and then I'll pop back in every once in a while, especially when we get to the live Q&A part, because we'll be taking your questions live about the information that you've been learning on our free video series. So for now, let's go ahead and pop over and see if I can do this, right? Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the slides, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so the name of the webinar again is How to Motivate Your Students While Keeping Yourself Motivated in the Process. And I want to start out by making sure that you are in the right place. So you're in the right place if you are killing yourself creating great lessons and you want your students to buy into those lessons. You really want your students to learn, to be excited about learning. You're creating these fabulous lessons and your students are just apathetic about them, or they don't participate at all. So if you're facing that frustration right now, you're in the right place. You're also in the right place if you've tried motivation tricks and strategies and they just didn't work. I don't know about you, but I used to get so frustrated when I would go to a conference or to a workshop and I'd hear about this great strategy. And I'd try the strategy only to realize that it didn't work. And if you're like me and you've tried strategy after strategy after strategy and you realize that they just don't work sometimes, or maybe they do work, but they only work for a little while, then you are in the right place. You're in the right place if you've started using a particular motivation trick and it worked, but now you have to keep it up or else your students won't buy into your classroom. That happens a lot with a lot of teachers. One teacher I know, she was giving her kids candy for doing certain things in the classroom, but after a while, the students would not do anything unless she gave them a piece of candy. Another teacher with whom we worked was giving students extra points for doing certain things in the classroom. And after a while, every time she would ask the students to do something, the students would say, how many extra points will I get? So if you have been using a strategy and it's worked, but now your students won't tap into that intrinsic or that internal motivation, and they will only work if you give them candy or if you give them points or if you use that strategy, you're in the right place. I want to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Robin Jackson, and many of you may know me from one of my books. I've written 9 books, including the best-selling book, Never Work Harder Than Your Students, and Other Principles of Great Teaching. I'm a former teacher, and I'm a former middle school administrator, and I'm also the founder of MindSteps Inc., and the creator of the MindSteps Vault. And I'm a technology neophyte when it comes to webinars, as you can see from some of the technical difficulties that we've had earlier. But I'm also a lifelong learner, and I am excited about learning new things, and I'm also excited that I get to learn these new things alongside of you. Now, here's what you're going to learn today by hanging around. First of all, you're going to learn a very specific way to motivate all of your students without having to use carrots or sticks. In other words, I'm going to show you how to motivate your students without having to bribe them or cajole them or threaten them. You're also going to learn the 4 critical steps you must take to ensure that you maintain your students' motivation over time. You're going to learn the answer to the most common questions we get asked about motivation, and you're going to learn the new way to maintain your own motivation. And this one's really important because we've been working with a lot of teachers lately, and a lot of teachers are telling us that this is the thing that they've been ignoring. And when they stop ignoring this, when they start actually feeding their own motivation, it's amazing the difference that it makes in their own teaching. We're very altruistic. We want to do what's best for our children, and we kill ourselves in the process. But you're going to learn how to maintain your own motivation, and how doing so it can immediately and surprisingly increase your students' motivation as well. And finally, you're going to learn how to avoid these motivation mistakes. There's some very specific motivation mistakes that you can make so that you can finally have a classroom that you've always wanted. So you want to make sure that you stick around to the very end. And those of you who've been trying to get on for a while, we're going to do an extra bonus for you because you've been sticking with us so far. But if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you my 3 best secrets for motivating students. These are the things that if you can't do everything, these are the 3 things you must do to get started. And these are the 3 things that I think have the biggest payoff and make the biggest difference right away. And I'm going to give you a great infographic that summarizes the 4 major barriers to motivation. We're going to put that right in that chat section there, and you'll be able to grab a hold of that at the end. And then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to tell you about the MindSteps Vault, and I'll share with you a little bit more about that. Because as we've been doing this video series, we've been getting a lot of questions about that as well. So I'll just spend a little bit of time talking to you about the MindSteps Vault and clearing up a few things or a few questions that you may be having about that as well. Now, I want to start by talking about my own personal motivation journey and what it was like for me to kind of come to this idea about motivation. Now, I want to tell you this journey for a couple of reasons. First of all, I want you to see that I didn't start out knowing a whole bunch about motivation. I started out, like a lot of you, with just some very simple kind of ideas and strategies that I picked up along the way. And I want you to understand how I came to this whole idea about motivation and the difference that it's made, especially in the lives of my students and in the lives of many of my clients. So I started out as a high school English teacher, and I faced some of the very same motivation challenges that you face. I used to teach juniors and seniors, and you have not seen unmotivated students until you've seen seniors in the last semester of their senior year. They've already been accepted into college or not. They've already made their plans for the rest of their lives, and a lot of them are just biding their times until they get out of class. It's really, really hard to take those students and get them excited or interested in reading Hamlet or writing essays at that point. And so I really struggled with motivation with students who were just really, they had senioritis, they were kind of just checked out between spring break and graduation. And even earlier in the year, I struggled a lot with motivation. A lot of my students were struggling students. They didn't have a lot of the soft skills they really needed to be successful. They had a history of failure. Some of them were just doing time until they could get out of school and get on with the rest of their lives. And I'm quoting my students exactly. Some of my students actually told me that. So I tried some motivation strategies. Some worked, some didn't, and I just kind of started bumbling along. Well, eventually I left teaching because I felt this call to write this book, and I ended up writing Never Work Harder Than Your Students. And in Never Work Harder Than Your Students, principle number 1 is that you have to start where your students are. Now, I believe very strongly in that, and I shared some strategies for doing that, but a lot of people started to ask me, well, I want to start where my students are, but how do I get my students motivated? Well, I would give them some strategies. I'd give them some things that had worked for me or that I'd seen work for some of our clients, but I didn't really have kind of a whole comprehensive system. Well, my editor for Never Work Harder Than Your Students came back to me and asked me if I would be willing to write a book on how to motivate students. And at first I said no, because I didn't feel like I had a whole bunch to say that was new. I was using a lot of the same strategies and a lot of the same advice that many authors who were giving at the time, and I didn't think that there was anything more to say about motivation. So I said no at first, but when I was working with my clients, I could see their frustration with a lot of the typical techniques that were out there, and they wanted something more. So I started writing the book and doing the research, and I read everything I could find on motivation, and it just didn't seem to satisfy me. I can't tell you, I read about at least 10 books on motivation, research articles. I mean, I immersed myself in this thing, and I wrote my first draft of the book, and my editor rejected it and said that it was not ready. Now, I'm writing a book on motivation. Can you think of anything more unmotivating than having your book on motivation be rejected by your editor for being not right? And I was really depressed at that point. I thought, you know what? I am totally unmotivated to write this book on motivation, and I really don't have anything interesting to say. But that same year, I was in a school and I was coaching some teachers who were dealing with some really intense motivation issues. And as I was working and sitting in the classroom, I started watching the students, and I started to pick up a couple of things on about the students, and then sharing that with the teacher. And the teacher started to pick up on some of the same things. And so, based on what we were noticing about the students, we began to change the approach with the students, and we started seeing immediate results. I mean, there were some things that were really, really working, and things I hadn't seen before, or hadn't realized before. And so I started sharing what I was learning with several other teachers and some of our other clients, and they started making a huge difference in the lives of their kids, and they started seeing this turnaround. We even tried it in an alternative school, and let me tell you, these were some of the most unmotivated students I'd ever seen, and yet it was making a huge difference. And so I decided to try writing the book again. And so I wrote my third draft. I've written this book completely. This is my third time writing this book. But I started to kind of see how it all would come together. And when I turned that into my publisher, they said, okay, now you've hit it. And then they published that. And that book became How to Motivate Reluctant Learners. And I've even tweaked a lot of what I've written in that book since writing that book, and gotten even better at this thing. And now this is something that we share with my clients all over the world, actually, and we're starting to see these huge shifts in students' motivation. So I won't have time during this webinar to share everything with you today, but I do want to share a couple of things that I think can be really powerful in helping you motivate your students. But before we do that, because this is a live Q&A webinar, I want to really tackle some of your big questions. And some of the ones that we've been seeing a lot online and that people sent in ahead of time that I want to tackle is, first of all, how does this apply to gifted students? And then what about students who are really struggling? And then what about my own motivation? So let's start with the first one. How does this apply to gifted students? This one's really important because a lot of times gifted students have different reasons for being unmotivated. I mean, students who are struggling are typically unmotivated because they are so tired of being in that free fall of failure, and they just feel like, well, I don't need to try, or they don't have the currencies, or some of the other things that we've been talking about in that motivation video series. But when it comes to gifted students, a lot of times their motivation comes from not institutional barriers, not even from sometimes internal barriers. A lot of times their motivation is sapped by interpersonal barriers and instructional barriers. And instructional barriers seem to be the biggest barriers when it comes to gifted students. They're often very bored because their perceived ability doesn't match their perception of the challenge of the work that you're providing them. Also, gifted students struggle because a lot more of them are either mastery focused, or a lot of them are typically autonomy driven. And if your classroom does not feed their will driver because they're gifted, they will find other ways to feed their will drivers themselves. And sometimes that means checking out of what you're doing and feeding their will drivers by getting distracted and doing other work instead, or rushing through your work so they can get to the work that really does feed their will drivers. So when you're dealing with gifted students, you really want to focus on, first of all, making sure that your classroom feeds all 4 will drivers. And secondly, really focusing on that idea of challenge, making sure that you have the right balance of challenge for these students. And those are the big areas that you need to focus on if you want to motivate gifted students. The other thing that would be really interesting for gifted students is to engage them in conversations about what are their will drivers and how does the work best meet their will drivers, because a lot of times students can quickly articulate their will drivers once they learn the concept of will drivers. And secondly, a lot of times gifted students can tell you what instructional strategies work and provide them with the right balance of challenge and which ones are off balance. And so you can share some of this information with your gifted students and use it as a way to help them give you feedback and help them to take a little bit more ownership and responsibility of their own learning, and give them a way to do that that's constructive. Now, The opposite is often the case with struggling students, students who are really struggling. A lot of times those students have internal barriers and they have institutional barriers that keep them out of the classroom. A lot of times they feel marginalized by our rules of engagement, or they have internal barriers. There are currencies that they're missing. They're missing academic knowledge or soft skills or social skills or networks and availability of resources, and that's what gets in the way of their motivation. So when you're working with struggling students, you really want to work at those institutional barriers, making sure that your students not only feel included, but that you're very transparent about those unwritten rules or that hidden curriculum that may be keeping students from being able to engage and invest fully in your classroom. And you also want to make sure that you are addressing those internal barriers by helping students not only acquire currencies they don't have. For instance, if your students don't know how to take notes, they may be struggling and unmotivated. If you simply show them how to take notes, not only would they be motivated to take the notes, but they also would be motivated because in taking those notes, they become more successful in your class. So not only are we giving students currencies and building in students currencies that they need but don't have, but we're showing students how to code switch, and this is really important. A lot of times students won't invest in our classroom because we demand that they use our currencies and get rid of the currencies they bring with them to the classroom. And that creates too much stress on your students. None of us uses one set of currencies all the time. And so the idea is to tell your students, okay, you have some currencies and some of them will work really well in a classroom, but some are not right for the classroom. And instead, I'd love for you to go ahead and learn how to code switch so that you can shift from one currency to another set of currencies based on the context. It's amazing how empowering that can be for students who are really struggling or who are really kind of holding on to one set of currencies. You really open up the options for these students, and when students see that they have not only options, but they also have agency. They're able to control their outcome for the first time for some of these students. It can be really, really motivating. Now, the third big question that we've gotten is, what about my own motivation? How do I keep myself motivated in the process? And the answer to that is that you really do have to focus on your own will drivers, and you have to make sure that you're not ignoring your will driver. So a lot of us focus so much on our students' will drivers, and we don't focus enough on our own primary will drivers. And so we're not deliberate about making sure that we feed our will drivers throughout the day. I'll use myself as an example. My primary will driver is mastery, and so I am most fulfilled in my work when I can figure out a way to take something, some concept, and help somebody else understand it, because I'm a teacher. And so I'm always trying to master and get better at that idea of helping other people take a concept and master that concept. So for me, what will keep me motivated throughout the day are opportunities to feel competent and successful with students. And I can tell you, my worst days are the days when I feel unsuccessful helping students understand something. And my best days are those days when I feel successful helping my students understand something. So the way I feed my sense of mastery is that I am constantly learning and getting better and honing my craft. When I have a bad day, when I don't reach a student, or when I don't reach an adult in a way that I wanted to reach that student or that adult, when I'm feeling really low after that experience, the way that I feed my will driver is I go home and I try to figure out how to do better next time. So I immediately counteract that negative experience with something that will feed my will driver. The same thing is true for a sense of belonging. People who need belonging want relationships. Relationships are really important. And sometimes our students don't want a relationship with us, or they reject our attempts to connect with them. So that might represent a really bad day. So how do you feed that will driver? You have to immediately go out and connect with somebody else. Make a connection with somebody, some other student, a parent. So I know teachers who understand that belonging is their will driver, and if they've had a really tough day, one of the things they do to feed their will driver is they send out joy notes. They send out positive reinforcement to some of the students who've done really well, random act, or they do some sort of random act of kindness, or they make sure that they hook up with their colleagues after work and debrief so that they can have that connection and that relationship, because that's really important. For some people who need autonomy, a lot of times school can feel like it's just such a huge threat to your autonomy because everything's so prescribed. So a lot of times a bad day for you is a day where you weren't able to do the things you wanted to do and you were working on everybody else's agenda. Or a day where you didn't have any control over your day or your time. So if you have that need for autonomy and you've had that kind of bad day, the way you feed your will driver is you go do something over which you have complete control. You design a unit that is aligned with how you think students should learn. You take control over some portion of your time for that day and work on something that you want to work on. Or sometimes it's just this feeling that you have control over your own outcomes. So it may be that you go and you learn, or you go and you take what you've learned and you adapt it to your students and your teaching style. So let's say you were forced to sit in a workshop all day where you were forced to kind of do these group activities and all these things that the workshop presenter made you do. By the way, hopefully you never felt that way about a MindSteps workshop, but let's say you're in a workshop and that happens. You're drained at the end of the day. Autonomy is your primary will driver. So what you need to do in order to feed your autonomy right away, even in that workshop, is to find some time and take what you're learning and immediately adapt it, because that feeds your sense of autonomy and helps you get through that workshop and actually learn something. And finally, if you have a sense of purpose and a need for a sense of purpose, and that's your primary will driver, a bad day for you might be a day where you did a lot of things that didn't actually mean anything, that weren't meaningful, that you filled out some paperwork, and you shepherded the kids down to the auditorium for an assembly, or you spent the entire day kind of meeting some demands of your job that weren't really important to you. In order to feed your will driver, at the end of that day, you immediately need to go and do something that reminds you of your purpose. If your sense of purpose is, I want students to understand their options and their possibilities, then you need to find some point in that day where you connect with the student and remind that student of options or possibilities. Or you need to find an opportunity during the day to create another option for a student who had very limited options. In other words, whatever your will driver is, if you are going to stay motivated yourself, you have to be very deliberate about cultivating experiences and interactions in every day in your daily work life so that you feed your will driver. Now, we've gotten a couple of other questions in from a couple of people in the Q&A, and I want to make sure I address these questions as well. So one of the questions that we've gotten from a couple of people is, how do I identify my students' currencies? That's a huge question that we've gotten asked a lot, and we see it coming in here now. So I want to talk quickly about how you can identify your students' currencies. And you know what, for this one, because I want to look at you for a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and take off the screen share and actually kind of take a look at you if I can see if I can make this work. There we go. All right, so hi. So let's talk about this one, because this one has to do with students' currencies and how you can detect students' currencies. And this is a huge deal for a lot of people. People understand that currencies are important, but they're really nervous about, okay, well, how do I know what currencies my students carry and which ones they prefer? So first, let me define currencies. Currencies are just anything that we use to get something that we want. And in the classroom, currencies are exchanged, they're traded, they're negotiated all the time. And there are really four big major kind of categories of currencies that happen or that are exchanged or negotiated in the classroom all the time. Now, the first one is the most obvious one. That's academic knowledge. And that can be anything from background knowledge to skills that students have acquired over their years in school, to even academic behaviors, things like studying for a test or participating in a classroom discussion. Those are academic behaviors. That means that kids know and understand not only the content or the skills that are required by the curriculum, they also know how to play the game of school. They know how to learn, they know how to do the things that you need to do in school in order to be considered successful. The second category of currency is the idea of soft skills. And for me, this is probably the area of currencies that is probably the most powerful in both supporting students and keeping students engaged and interested in your classroom. And if you can build these currencies in your students, you can see this huge difference, not just in their motivation, but in their investment in the classroom and in their ability to handle classroom work. And the idea of soft skills are those unwritten skills that are kind of demanded by your curriculum, but they don't say it in your curriculum. So knowing how to pay attention, knowing how to take notes, knowing how to monitor myself when I'm working and understanding, ooh, I'm stuck here and I need help, or oh, I've got this, or I'm progressing in the right way. Knowing how to manage time, knowing how to juggle different subjects, knowing how to sit down and allocate enough time to do your homework every day. Those are soft skills. And a lot of times we assume our students know or have those soft skills already, and they really don't. And so it's a huge mistake to assume that students have those soft skills. Now, the third category has to do with social skills, and this is really about knowing how to get others to help me and knowing how to interact in a positive way with others. And you can see how this can be really important in the classroom. Not only do social skills impact students' ability to work together and to get along in the classroom and to feel like they're part of the classroom, social skills are really, really important because if I don't have good social skills, it's a lot harder for me to get the adults or the teachers who support me to be able to support me in the way that I need to support and help. So students who don't have social skills don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to accept praise or criticism. They don't know how to establish relationships with other classmates to give them help. So they are just going at it alone, whereas a kid with great social skills knows how to get people to help them, and we all need help. So a student with great social skills will know how to get a classmate to grab the homework and let them know what the homework was on the days they were absent. They know how to work cooperatively in groups. They know how to work alone. They know how to interact with a teacher in a positive way. That's why those currencies are really important. Now, the last one has to do with my networks or my resources. These are students who have these currencies. They know people who know people who know people. So they know people who can help them in math. If their parents aren't good at math, or if they don't know anybody, they can find somebody to help them be successful in math. They know how to navigate a system, so they know whom they can go to ask questions in the school. They know what resources are available, and they know how to tap into those resources. And if they don't know, they know somebody who knows, and they know how to find that person and get that person to help them. So those are the four major categories of currency, and the idea when you're trying to discover your students' currencies is first, look at the activity that you want your students to engage in. It could be an assignment, it could be a learning modality that you have in your classroom, whatever it is. Look at that and try to figure out what currencies are demanded by that task. Then look at your students and figure out, do they have the skills that they need? Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to do something simple like have students read a textbook chapter and then take notes on that textbook chapter in their notebooks that night for homework. Well, there's academic knowledge. I need to know the vocabulary. I need to know text features. I need to know how to read a textbook. I need to know how to organize my notes, all those things. So that's academic currencies that are required for that. But then there's some unwritten currencies. I need to make a good guess for how long it's going to take me to read this chapter. I need to manage my time. I need to manage my attention so that I can be focused. I need to know what note-taking strategy works best for me. Those are some of the soft skills that I need. Social skills might include things like I need to know how to grab a buddy and compare my notes to a classmate's notes to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Or I need to know how to ask another person in my household to help me figure out the vocabulary, or I might need to know how to ask my teacher to help me set up my notebook, or I didn't hear the assignment in class, but I don't know how to approach my teacher after class to really get clarity on why we're taking notes and what we're supposed to be doing with those notes. And then finally, I might also need a network. I might need access to certain resources in my network. For instance, I might need a pen, I might need paper, I might need a notebook, I might need a quiet place to study, I might need somebody to kind of go over my notes with me and quiz me on my notes afterwards. I might need somebody to kind of recommend a link online that can help expand the notes that I'm taking or explain a concept that I don't know. So I need all those things in order to do something as simple as read a textbook chapter and take notes. So the thing that you want to do is you want to look at each assignment and figure out what are the currencies that are being demanded by that assignment. And then ask yourself, do my students actually have those currencies? And if they don't, you have to make sure that you show your students how to acquire those currencies, or they won't be able to engage fully in your assignment. Let's take a look and see what else we've got here. Okay, here's another question that's come in. Someone's asking, what's the best way to improve students' perceived ability? And this has to do with that fourth barrier to motivation, which is that instructional barrier. And remember, I talked about challenge, and challenge is a balance of students' perceived ability and their perception of the level of challenge of the assignment. So someone's asking, how do I improve students' perceived ability? Well, my best resource on that is Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. Carol Dweck talks about how you can change students' perceptions of their ability. And the most powerful way to do that is to shift students from a fixed mindset where they believe that their ability is fixed and that there's nothing they can do about their ability to what's called a growth mindset, where students believe that their intelligence can grow over time. So Carol Dweck talks about that, and she says it's really, really important to use growth-oriented feedback and to engage students in conversations about their perceptions of their ability to get them to shift from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So the best way to change students' perceptions of their own ability is to use the right kind of feedback that focuses on their effort and not their innate ability. So one of the videos that we've been creating for Inside the Vault, and one of the resources that we actually have for free online, talks about how you can shift from fixed feedback to growth-oriented feedback. So what we'll do is, in the replay of this webinar, we'll try to have a link to that resource so you can see what they look like. And then that way you can start to see how you can start to change students' perceptions of their ability. Let's see if we have any other questions. Okay, all right, someone is asking about what are some specific ways to feed students will drivers? And that's actually going to take us to one of the 3 secrets that I promised I would share with you at the end of this webinar. So why don't we do this? Why don't I shift over to those 3 secrets, and then that way I can answer this question, and those secrets are going to ask a couple of other questions that are coming in. Then I'll take one last look to make sure that we've answered all the questions that have been asked so far, and then I'm going to share with you a little bit of information, and then I'll also share with you that handout that I promised you. So give me 2 seconds. Right now I just want to switch back over to screen sharing. And here we go. All right. So let's talk about motivation secret number 1. And motivation secret number 1 is that you must feed students will drivers. This is the fastest way I know to change the culture of your classroom and get students motivated and invested in your classroom as quickly as possible. And if you'll recall, those will drivers were autonomy, mastery, purpose, and belonging. And I want to read to you a quote from some of the research that I've seen on motivation that really kind of brings this home, why this is so important. So it says that when a student feels a sense of belonging in a classroom community, when that student believes that effort will increase ability and competence, right? When that student believes that success is possible and within his or her control, and when they see schoolwork as interesting and relevant to his or her lives, they're much more likely to persist in academic tasks despite setbacks and to exhibit the kind of academic behaviors that lead to learning and school success. Now that's directly from some of the research, but look at how they do a really good job of naming those 4 will drivers. It's in research language, but let's go back and tease that out, right? So let me say that again. When a student feels a sense of belonging in a classroom community, well, that's belonging, that's that belonging will driver, believes that effort will increase ability and competence, right? That's that sense of mastery. I believe that if I work hard enough, I can actually master this material, right? Then it says believes that success is possible and within his or her control. Well, that's nothing but autonomy. That's that belief that, listen, I not only can be successful, but I can control that. The success is not something that's random that's going to happen to me. I actually have some agency there. And then the last one, that they believe that they see schoolwork as interesting or relevant to his or her life. Well, that's purpose. So what the research is confirming over and over and over again is that when students have autonomy, mastery, purpose, and belonging every single day, that's when you see success in school. But here's the really important part. When students feel as though they don't belong, that they're not smart enough, that they won't be able to succeed, and they cannot find relevance in the work at hand, they're much more likely to give up and withdraw from academic work. Now, think about that. Will drivers are so important that they become the #1 difference between students who choose to invest and students who withhold their investments. Now, that means that this has to happen in the classroom. You have to feed all 4 of these will drivers. You have to make students feel that success is possible and within their control, that if they just work hard enough, they can develop more competence and be successful, that what they're doing in class is relevant and meaningful, and that they belong to an entire classroom community and that their contributions to that community are valuable and appreciated. So what we have to think about is, how do we do that in the classroom every day? How are you giving students this feeling that their success is something they can control, that their failure is not fatal, it's not permanent, that they can get good at something and that they can develop mastery over time and competence? How can we make students feel that what they're doing is relevant? And how can we make students feel that they're part of our classroom community? There are a lot of strategies out there that are able to do that. What I want you to think about is this big framework. Every lesson, every day, you have to make sure. One of the things that we do when we're training here at MindSteps is we try to make sure that every training, every full-day workshop we do, that there's opportunities for autonomy, there's opportunities for mastery, there's opportunities for purpose, and there are opportunities for belonging. It's a deliberate choice that you have to make, and when you do that, you're going to see a huge difference in the number of students who are willing to participate and invest in your classroom. Now, motivation secret #2 is that you have to avoid this motivation mistake. And the #1 motivation mistake we make is assuming that our students are motivated by the same thing that we're motivated by. Now, think about that. I used to make this mistake all the time, and it used to drive me nuts. I'm motivated by mastery, and I could not understand why some of my students didn't want to get better. It just blew my mind. I also couldn't understand why some students were willing to sacrifice their grades in order to act out because they thought I didn't like them. What does my liking them have to do with your being successful? I mean, I couldn't understand it. And it took me years to realize that the reason a lot of my students were not successful in my classroom is because their will driver was different from mine. When I stopped looking at students through the lens of my will driver and I started looking at my students through the lens of their own will drivers, all of a sudden, not only did their behavior make sense, but my response to their behavior was a lot more effective because I was dealing with them in their will drivers and not dealing with them through the lens of my own will driver. If you want to see a huge difference in the motivation of your students in your classroom, you have got to make sure that you are looking at students and detecting their will drivers and not looking at them through the lens of your own will driver. Motivation secret #3 is that you must feed your own motivation. And this is not an either-or proposition. A lot of times teachers say, well, if I'm too busy feeding my students' will drivers, how can I feed my own will drivers? No, you have to do both every single day, or you're not going to stay motivated. And over time, if you're not motivated, unmotivated people can't motivate anyone. So you need to make sure that you feed your own will drivers. And I'm going to talk to you about one way you can do that has nothing to do with what happens with your students, and it has to do with your own professional growth and learning. Remember, a mastery focus. So this example makes a lot of sense and it feeds my mastery wheel driver. So I'm going to feed my mastery wheel driver while I feed your wheel drivers through talking about this, so everybody gets something out of it. So the idea is that if you need autonomy, then one of the things that you want to do is you want to craft your own PD process. You don't want to just take the PD process that's provided to you by your school district, or you're always going to be frustrated. Find your own resources. Find your own way of doing things. If you're a master, you need to make sure that you get good PD. And again, your district may or may not provide that for you. So again, you're looking for your own opportunities to learn and grow in areas that are important to you. If you need purpose, you want to make sure that everything that you do for your professional development can somehow be connected to your goals. Sometimes district-provided PD isn't connected to your goals, it's connected to district goals. And that's okay, but you have to make sure that you supplement with PD that's connected to your own goals. And then finally, if you need belonging, you need to find your tribe. And it may, if you're really, really lucky, your tribe is at your school. Your colleagues are feeding you. Your colleagues are helping you grow and become better. And they appreciate you and the contribution you're making to the community. But if you don't have that at your school, all is not lost. Find your tribe. Find your tribe online, find your tribe at other schools. One of the things that I used to do, I was working at a school at one point, and I couldn't find my tribe at my school right away. You know where I found it? I went to a workshop. I met some other people at the workshop. We exchanged numbers, and we decided to get together once a month. And once a month, we'd get together at a local coffee shop after school. We'd spend maybe an hour before everybody had to go and get home or go to class or pick up children. But for that 1 hour a week, we fed each other. And so you can find your tribe either face-to-face, you can find your tribe online. A lot of times, at various points in my career, I've gone online and found people who are like-minded in forums and other places to talk about education and to exchange resources, and it was a huge help to me. So the idea is that you've got to feed your own motivation, but not by sacrificing your wheel driver for somebody else's wheel driver, but by finding ways to feed your wheel driver that will help you feed your students' wheel drivers as well. Now, I want you to remember something, and it's really important. This is not just a theory. I wasted years. You heard my story at the beginning when I talked about my own motivation journey. I wasted years getting caught up in theories. Theories are really important, but this is really practical stuff. And this is exactly what I did to not only transfer my own teaching, but I use this even now to help my clients do the same thing. And we have seen some amazing results. Kids who have been just completely intractable, not willing to do any work at all. We've been able to reach these students through this process. So I know it works. And not only that, it doesn't just work on K-12 students, it works on adult learners as well. So our coaches use this very strategy to help motivate our coaches and to help motivate the teachers we train or the administrators that we train as well. So this is not just some theory, something that I read in a book. This is the exact same strategy that I use whenever I'm working on motivating others. And it's exactly the same principle that if you're new to teaching or even if you're a veteran teacher, it's the exact same principle. So this is not something that you have to wait to try when you get better at teaching, or it's not something that that's beyond your expertise. I have seen master teachers take this theory and take it and make their teaching even much more masterful. And that's because a lot of master teachers do this intuitively, but once they understand this framework and how it works and that this process does work, they take it and they begin to be very deliberate and intentional about using it in their classroom, and that's when they start to see this huge change. So what's this all about? Well, when you do this, when you use these three strategies, when you use some of the things that I've been sharing with you in those motivation training videos, it's really about becoming this amazing teacher that you were meant to be. Now, motivation is only one slice of the pie. I mean, there is more to it than that. But everything that we've been trying to teach you is really about just helping you become the teacher you wanted to be when you first started, the teacher you always dreamed that you could be in this field. And if you never dreamed about teaching, if you kind of fell into teaching, well, you know, welcome. We're glad you're here. And now you have this opportunity not just to dream about it and not just to kind of fall into teaching, but to actually make it a reality in your practice. It's about having students who are engaged and excited about learning. And for me, this is the big reward right here. This is the big payoff. I want my students I don't want to drag my students through the curriculum and force them into every experience. I want them to get so excited about learning. I want them to be really engaged in their own learning. I want them to own their own learning. I want them to be enthusiastic about what they're learning. And it's about not working yourself to death. I mean, you work so hard. We heard from so many of you who are saying, hey, I want to watch the videos, but I'm just drowning right now in work. I don't know that I have time. And think about it. You don't have time to do something that you know will be valuable. You're so busy that you don't have time to take. You don't have 18 minutes or a half an hour to take for yourself. That's working too hard. And so this is about putting these strategies and this framework in place so you don't have to work so hard. And it's really about making the difference you were meant to make. It's hard to make that major difference in the lives of students if they're not motivated, if they're not paying attention, if they're not engaged, if they're not even showing up. And what's frustrating, I think it's the #1 most frustrating thing for teachers, is that you know you can make a difference. You know you could change a child's life or a student's life. And yet the student doesn't see the benefit or the reward, and they won't trust you enough to allow you to help them tap into their full potential or take advantage of the opportunities they don't even know they have. So this is about helping you do that. It's about making that real difference, a meaningful difference in your students' lives. So I'm really not sure why you showed up today on this webinar. I'm glad you're here, but I don't know your specific situation. I don't know why you showed up today. I mean, maybe you're fed up with working so hard and not seeing results you want to see with your students, and you're hoping that you can find something here that can help you. Or it may be because you wanted to start making a bigger difference in your students' lives. I mean, you can see that you're making a difference in some students' lives, but there are other students you haven't been able to reach yet, and you want to be able to reach those students. Or perhaps you're just making it through the year. You're just you know, hoping that summer will come sooner than later, and you're so overwhelmed and you're so tired, and you know you're just kind of at this point just doing what you need to do to get through the year, but you really want something more for your students, and you want something more for yourself. You know that there's more that you could be doing, and you're tired of just making it through the year. You want something more. So here's the thing that I really hope that you get. If you can get this one thing, investing in learning the principles is a way to be that teacher and make that difference. Now, the things that I've been sharing with you about motivation, they're part of a principle, and the principle is start where your students are. And it's a part of a bigger framework of 7 principles. And if you've been blown away by what you've learned about the motivation piece, if it's helped you see motivation in a different way, well, that's just a tip of the iceberg. There are 6 more principles out there that can help you see teaching in a different way and help you to start making a meaningful difference. You know, going on my journey and discovering the secret, it just utterly changed my life. When I began to understand these principles and started using them in my teaching, first of all, teaching stopped feeling like work. I can't explain it. It stopped feeling like work, and it just started humming along. And you know, that idea of seamlessness, I was a decent teacher, I was a good teacher, but once I learned these principles, my teaching got really seamless. And not only that, this is the part for me, because remember, mastery is my will driver. I remember that once I started applying these principles, I got so much better so quickly. I mean, I amazed myself. It was just, all of a sudden, I could feel it. I just was in the zone most, if not all of the time. And my students were just making these huge leaps and bounds. I mean, I'm not overselling this. It really, really did change my life. And it's something that you can do. I mean, this is not something that I just discovered and it's, you know, it's the Robin way of teaching. these principles have been around long before I came along, and they'll be around long after I leave. You know, people always say to me, they come up to me and they say, I mean, you're not telling me anything I didn't know. Yeah, but this framework helps you take that instinct that is inside of you and turn that instinct into results. And it's something that you can do, and you can in a very short period of time do this. This is not something that's going to take you 3 and 4 and 5 years to do. Once you start learning these principles and you start tweaking, and it's just a series of tweaks to your practice, you start to see the results, and then you start tweaking more and more. And because all of these principles are interconnected, once you get good at one principle, you get better at the other ones just by default, just because they're so connected. So this is something that you can do. It's something that we show teachers how to do all the time. And what is one of the most gratifying parts of my job is that I'll go somewhere and I'll share these principles, and then I'll come back a year later and people start showing me these test scores that make my eyes bug out. I just can't believe it. Or they start talking about the transformation of their classroom culture, or they start talking about their personal transformation that they've made as a result of applying these principles. This is radical stuff, and it's something that you can do in a very short period of time. So the obvious question is, how do I learn the principles, and how do I use them to make a bigger difference? And there are really two ways to learn the principles and to use them to make the difference. Because I don't want you to just learn them and be able to recite them. When I say learn them, I mean actually put them and make them a part of your practice. Now the first way is you can do it slow. You can use trial and error, and you can use a lot of what I've shared with you today. One of the things that I've been very committed to do at MindSteps, and this is a part of our company core values, we try to make as many resources available and free for teachers as we possibly can. People tell us we give away too much stuff. So you can use the materials that you find on our website and in our blog, and we're in our newsletter, and even in this webinar series, and you can start to apply it to your practice, and I'm telling you, you're going to see results. Trust me on this. You will see results right away. And so you can use it, but it'll be slow, and it'll take some trial and error, but you could totally do this on your own. Now, the second way is that you can do it quickly, and I have a full 7-step process that can help you do this very quickly and get to the difference that you really want to make for your students. So I love this quote by Albert Einstein. It says, everything in life should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. And the idea around this process that we've created for helping you learn these principles is, we know that you're busy. We know you don't have a lot of time. We know that you don't want to spend 5 years at this work, that you want quick results. So what we've tried to do is make it as simple as possible, but not simpler than that. And that kind of is the kind of way that we've kind of created this system. So it's the system that I'm talking about is the MindSteps Vault, and it's designed to give you the solution, every little thing you need to learn the principles immediately and apply them to your practice right away. So what we tried to do is, everything that we put in the vault, we tried to make sure that once you looked at it, you read the resource, or you learned the thing, there's something there that you can do right away to apply it to your practice. And it's absolutely the fastest way to get from where you are to the classroom and the students that you want, to being the teacher that you really want to be. So what is it exactly? It's 7 modules, and they're based 1 module for each principle. And it's delivered every 2 weeks for the first 14 weeks, so you get a year's membership inside the vault. For the first 14 weeks, we take you slowly through the 7 principles, so every 2 weeks you'll get a new module opening and you'll get access to the resources there, so that way we don't overwhelm you. And in those resources we have tools, so there are actual planning tools or templates or strategies. We have resources, so there may be an article, or there may be something that you need to read, or infographic or something like that. We also have tutorials where I'll take you behind the scenes and I'll show you, here's the planning process from start to finish for how to plan a lesson, or for how to differentiate instruction, or for how to implement rigor. So there'll be tutorials in there that take you step by step, and there are instructional videos, very, very similar to the ones that you saw during the video release that we just did for those free videos. In fact, those videos belong inside the vault, and we just kind of took them outside the vault so you can get a taste of what's there. As you go through this process, you will earn certificates of completion, and those are aligned both to Danielson and Marzano. So when you get that certificate of completion, you'll be able to say, because I did this work, I am now better in this particular domain. And that can help you with your teacher evaluation system and to be able to show people, look, I'm doing work, and I'm actually aligning it to the domains and these systems so that you can be an active participant in your own teacher evaluation process. Plus, we're including bonus webinars just like this. So we'll do at least 3 live Q&A webinars as you're working through the material in the vault, so you have an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll add other information based on feedback that you've given us. We also have an Ask MindSteps feature, so you can access a MindSteps coach. So if there's something you're struggling with, you can access a MindSteps coach, and the coach can give you some support or point you to other resources that may be able to help you. So the idea here is that nothing is left out. Everything that you need to chart your own path towards mastery is there. Now, Module 1 is all about starting where your students are, which means that you can motivate all of your students. You can differentiate instruction in ways that meet your students' needs, and you can understand your students better. That's really because you're going to learn both strategies for how to motivate your students and overcome those 4 institutional barriers, and you're going to learn strategies for differentiating instruction so that you can customize the learning experience for each of your students. And Module 2, it's all about knowing where your students are going. That's really so that you can learn how to quickly and easily unpack any standard. So if you're using Common Core, or you're using SOL standards, or you're using the STAR standards in Texas, or you are an international educator and you're using standards that have nothing to do with any of those. Our system is standards agnostic. It's the same system no matter what standards you're using. You can also plan rigorous lessons that won't kill you or your students, and that's really important because you don't want to make things so rigorous your students just check out. You want to make sure that it's the kind of rigor that challenges your students and gives the right balance of challenge. And you're going to learn how to help every student learn how to think deeply and engage more meaningfully with the content. So this is really the module where you're going to learn all about rigor. What does it look like? What does it mean? How do you apply it? And how do you help your students access it? Module 3 is about expect to get them there, and this is going to allow you to examine your own teaching practice. So in Module 3, it's all about high expectations, but we're shifting. We're not just looking at what your expectations are for your students, we're looking at your expectations for yourself. So you're going to develop real high expectations, not the fake ones, the you can do it ones. No, these are going to be real ones. And you're going to develop these high expectations even in the face of the brutal facts of your reality. So we're not going to sugarcoat your reality. You are dealing with some really tough situations. And so how do you confront the brutal facts of your reality but still maintain unwavering faith that you can help your students, whomever your students are, get this material and master this material and be successful in school? And how are you going to make a difference in the lives of your students, especially when they're dealing with some really tough situations? And you're going to, in the process, tackle some of the biggest frustrations you face. You're going to learn how to tackle those frustrations with confidence and calm because you know how, you have a strategy for dealing with the brutal facts of your reality and maintaining your unwavering faith. In Module 4, support them along the way. You're going to learn this so that you can create a proactive intervention plan. You're not going to wait for kids to fail anymore. You're going to create a proactive intervention plan, and that intervention plan is going to help get students back on track right away. And so as a result, you're going to know exactly how to help your struggling students succeed and succeed with rigorous standards. We're not dumbing down anything here. You're gonna learn how to support students in a way that helps them meet even the most rigorous standards. You're gonna learn how to put your supports on automatic pilot. I mean, when I did this and when I was a teacher, that gave me so much more time to do some of the other things that were really important. Rather than kind of always scrambling around to try to support my students, I was able to put my support strategies on automatic pilot, and it made a huge difference. And you're going to keep your students from getting frustrated and giving up in the process, because frustrated students who give up are a lot harder to get back on track. Now, Module 5, you're going to learn how to use feedback to help you both get better, and that's going to allow you to easily create meaningful assessments aligned to your standards. There's a lot of talk now about assessments and how do we create them, how do we create assessments that are meaningful, and how do we give students grades that actually encourage them to try harder. or find creative and more meaningful ways to grade. Well, you're going to learn that in this module. And this is my favorite part. We're going to show you strategies that show you how to learn from your students. And when your students are looking at you and they know that you are learning from them just like they're learning from you, well, all of a sudden, they take a lot more ownership in their own learning because they have a way to be engaged as a learning partner. Oh, it's so powerful. And in Module 6, you're going to focus on quality, not quantity. And when you do that, you'll be able to find more time to do the things that really matter. And you'll also be able to get through your curriculum in the time that you have. We've seen this time and time again where people come to us and they say, I have 6 weeks and I still have to cover all of this, and how am I going to do it? And we help people sit down and figure out what are the need-to-knows and the nice-to-knows, and there's a very quick system for doing that so that you can focus on the parts of your curriculum that are really important, and you're not wasting your time on parts that aren't as important. You're going to learn how to be more productive and get more done in less time, and how to focus on what really matters to you. And finally, in Module 7, everybody's favorite module, Never Work Harder Than Your Students, you're going to learn strategies that are going to allow you to get your students more engaged. So here's where we're really going to talk about engagement and ownership, student ownership. And as a result of doing that, you're really going to enjoy your teaching more. I mean, once I got to this point, teaching was, this is why I still miss teaching to this day, because for me, I don't remember the hard work, because by this point I wasn't working harder than my students anymore. What I remember is just the satisfaction and the joy of making that difference in my kids' lives. And nowadays, when I run into my former students, you know, they're grown and they're adults now, they still talk about that difference. I mean, I just can't think of anything more gratifying or fulfilling to me as a teacher. And I want you to be able to make a bigger difference in the lives of your students. And so in this module, we're going to learn how to do just that. Now, I know a lot of you are wondering, how much will this cost me? Well, I want to just kind of set some context and help you understand that just one workshop where we just cover what's in one module, that workshop costs thousands of dollars. And quite frankly, we've invested over $40,000 and over 200 hours so far in creating the Vault. And that's a huge investment, because we believe in putting this professional learning in your hands. We've just gone ahead and made that huge investment, but it's a huge investment. And really, the Vault's only going to cost a fraction of that. So you can get started today for $97. That's our introductory rate, because we are still building the Vault. We're still learning a lot of lessons about the technology. So we're giving you an introductory rate as a Vault, pioneer. So we gave people an insider rate, and we opened up the Vault early, even before it was completed, to people, and they got that for $57. And we told them that rate is never coming back again, and we'll never offer the Vault for that rate again. So those people were able to get in for $57. This is the introductory rate. It's $97, and we're saying, I'm warning you now, the price of the Vault, unfortunately, is going to have to go up. But if you get the Vault now, you can lock in at this rate, which means that every year when you renew, you can renew at this rate. And you get immediate access to the Vault. And so you can get set up. The first module is going to be released on April 28th, but there's some work and some resources in there that you can access even now that will help you get ready for the module release on April 28th. And then you'll get a new module every 2 weeks for the first 14 weeks. But you're going to get a lot more. So you're going to get at least 3 free live webinars. And if we see a lot of interest in those webinars, we'll do more webinars. You're going to get $100 off of a MindSteps intensive. So we're having these 2-day intensives starting in the fall, where you can come, bring your own materials, and get some really intensive professional learning on a particular aspect of your practice. And those intensives are running about $500, where you're going to get $100 off to attend one of those intensives. So just think about that. $100 off of an intensive is worth more than the price of the Vault right there. And so to sum up, if you want to make a huge difference in your students' lives and you really don't want to work yourself to death in the process, there is just no better system that we've been able to find, because we didn't just throw a whole bunch of resources up online. We have created a systematic way for you to learn how to improve your practice. So this is exactly what I wish I had when I started out. I mean, it would have saved me hundreds of hours, a lot of frustration, quite frankly, a lot of money to be able to do this. I had to learn this on my own, and it took me 10 years to figure this out. And so I want to save you 10 years and a lot of trial and error and help you jumpstart your practice so that you can start making that difference right away. So you're going to get all of the modules, you'll get great support, and You can only start for you can start today. It's only $97. That's the introductory rate. And here's the important part. We have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so no hassle. So that means you can look at a couple of modules, go through a couple of modules, and if it's not working for you and you feel like, this is not quite what I want, then you can call us in 30 days, send us your materials, and we will happily refund your money. Because if we haven't helped you make that difference that you would deserve to make, that you were meant to make with your students, we don't deserve your money. So right now, what you need to do is you need to go to this web address here and sign up for the MindSteps Vault. And you can click on that link right now and get there. And then once you go to that page, you're going to click on the button that says yes. When you do that, you're going to be taken to a page that looks exactly like this. So you're just going to go through this process, and once you hit and put in your information and you join, you'll be getting a couple of welcome emails that tell you how to get access to the vault and then some strategies for going through the vault. You'll be able to take a tour of the vault right away so that you can learn how to start using it right away, and then the modules will start being released on April 28th. Okay, so you can get immediate access by just going to that link below and clicking on it and joining us in the vault. Now, you can, if you want to access, I promised you a couple of handouts. So if you just look over on to the right on the screen, you'll see a tab that says Pop-ins. If you click on that tab that says Pop-ins, you'll see the handout that I promised you. And it basically takes those 4 institutional barriers, and it's a tool that you can use to be reflective about your own classroom and figure out how those barriers, I'm sorry, they're not just the institutional barriers, they're institutional, internal, interpersonal, and instructional barriers. So those 4 big barriers, it shows you how you can think about your own classroom and examine which of those barriers seems to be the biggest barrier for your own students. So it's a great takeaway tool that you can use. I also encourage you to revisit some of the videos. Look at them as many times as you want, but on Thursday of this week, so Thursday, April 24th, the videos close and registration for the vault closes as well. If you have any other questions that we didn't answer today, please don't hesitate to shoot us a quick note. You can reach me at Robyn, R-O-B-Y-N, at mindstepsinc.com. Again, that's Robyn, R-O-B-Y-N, at mindstepsinc.com. All right, so let me click out of the screen sharing again. And I want to just kind of look at you one more time. Hi. And I want to thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. Thank you for enduring some of the technical difficulties and sticking around with us. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad I was able to help you. If I didn't answer your question today, or if I've raised other questions for you, please do not hesitate to email me at robyn@mindstepsinc.com. I love hearing from you. I've been getting tons of email, and I just stay up every night and trying to answer all the emails that I can, because this kind of interactivity is really important to me. And so please don't hesitate to email. And if you've been convinced today and you're ready to start that journey to becoming a master teacher, please go ahead and click the link and join us in the vault, and we'll be getting started with the vault shortly. Remember, the vault closes April 24th, so please make sure that you go ahead and join. Thank you for joining me today, everybody. Goodbye.